it's Elise here at Bowman Library with a whole new teen book spotlight. So for this week, we're taking down a little bit of a lower tone because the topic for this week is kind of a very serious one. We are taking a look at books that talk about or inspired by both fiction and nonfiction about the events that took place on September 11th, 2001. Because believe it or not, we are coming up this week on the 20th anniversary of the events of that day, and it changed everything. Whether you can remember what happened that day, like it was just yesterday, or maybe you've never really heard about it, or it's been a blip in your history textbook. We're taking a look at these books though because they provide an insight and a look at not only what happened that day, but also how it impacted the days, weeks, years after. There's even things going on today in the news that are a direct result from the event 20 years ago. So we're going to take a look at 6 titles. So let's get started. Our first one is Hope and Other Punchlines. So 17-year-old Abby is best known as Baby Hope. Her picture is synonymous with 9/11 as she is the 1-year-old baby being rescued from a daycare center. And when people saw this picture, it would bring them hope because in a time of crisis, there was this baby being saved. But all she really wants to be now is just Abby. So when she gets a job at a summer camp that's out of town, she hopes no one's going to know who she is. They're not going to recognize her, but that doesn't turn out to be the case when fellow counselor Noah recognizes her, and soon she unknowingly gets sucked into this mission, which is to solve one of the most haunting questions of Noah's life. What happened to his father on 9/11 when he went to work at the World Trade Center that morning, but he did not come home? This look at the events of that day through a fictional perspective, through the eyes of 2 individuals that were both impacted in different ways, but they were people that this is what they lived. It's a unique take. There's a touch of romance, there's some mystery, there's some historical fiction to it. This is Hope and Other Punchlines. Love is the higher law. So Claire and Peter are friends at their New York City high school, and on September 8th, they attend a party in which they meet Jasper, who is a freshman in college. Jasper and Peter hit it off and they decide to go on a date, which is supposed to take place the evening of September 11th. But between September 8th and the morning of September 11th, everything changes. This book takes you through each of their reactions that they have to this event and that take place in their city, and they each have a different response in how they perceive the tragedy and then what they want to do about it. So this takes place over weeks and months following the events of that day. This realistic look shows that not everyone feels and perceives events the same way as others, and will make you reflect on how you react to various things and times in your life, and maybe even this event. This is Love is the Higher Law. Last Man Down by Richard Piaciotto. So Piaciotto was a battalion chief for the New York Fire Department on the day of September 11th, and he found himself at ground zero in the midst of the attacks and the rescue efforts. As he starts going up the stairwells to help people evacuate and be rescued, it is then that he starts to feel the building shake, and it is then that the South Tower collapses. He was in the North Tower at the time though, and they continue upwards with a skeleton crew, and he is in the North Tower when it then collapses, and Piaciotto finds himself trapped under this rubble, and he needs to figure out how he is going to get out to save his life. This autobiography pulls no punches in regard to what Piaciotto and many other firefighters experienced and felt that day, and they provide a perspective that maybe you haven't heard about before or even thought about. You will not be able to put this one down, even though you probably know the outcome since he is writing an autobiography, but it is going to open your eyes in one that will make you appreciate everything that they did to help others that much more. This is Last Man Down. The 9/11 Report, a graphic adaptation. So after the events on 9/11, the federal government created an independent commission to figure out what happened leading up to that day, and then how it happened, and then learning from everything that happened, what needed to be changed, fixed, and improved on so it wouldn't happen again. When they were done, it took them a little over 7 years. It was a little over 800 pages. So what is amazing about this graphic novel though is it's only 15% of the written report size, but it covers all of the important points and takeaways from the report. So you don't have to read the 800 pages to understand what the 9/11 report found, but you can just look at it in graphic novel form. And I will promise you that this adaptation was approved by the commission's leader and co-chair, and it will just give you the straightforward facts from the report. And it will just, you have the opportunity to make your own opinions about what you think went right, what went wrong, what we should learn from, what's changed, what hasn't. This is the 9/11 report, a graphic adaptation. The usual rules. So 13-year-old Wendy finds herself at her Brooklyn, New York middle school on the morning of September 11th, and she's angry at her mother. That is then when they receive word that a plane has flown into the World Trade Center, and that is where her mother works on the 89th floor. When her stepfather Josh finally comes to pick her up to go home, they wait for her mom to come home and join them, but she never does. Now having to cope with the loss of her mother, as well as the angry words that she shared with her on that fateful morning, Wendy, on top of all of that, finds herself having to move across the country to California to live with her biological father, who she's never really known. She's barely even met him. So she's struggling with her grief, her guilt, her anger. This realistic look at 9/11 on how it impacted families and loved ones for weeks, months, years is one that's a must read, which helps us to understand how individuals who weren't there that day, but how their lives were changed forever. This is the usual rules. And our last one is The Only Plane in the Sky. As horrible as it says for me to say this is probably one of the best books I have ever read, not just because for the content, but how it's presented. So the author Garrett Graff tells the events of September 11th, 2001 through the words and voices of people who lived through that day, from the pilot of Air Force One to the ticket agent at the airport who helped the people who eventually hijacked the planes make their plane on time because they were running late. Everyone provides a different perspective on the events of that day. New York City, Pentagon, out in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. There were so many things that were eye-opening when I read this, and there were so many things that I had no idea that had even happened. You know, watching on TV in my high school classrooms, this just put everything in a totally new, different perspective for what happened. I cannot recommend this one enough. If you love audiobooks, this is an incredible audiobook to listen to. I will tell you, there are some things in it that can get really, really intense. They pull no punches. You might need to put the book down and walk away, but I highly recommend it if you're looking for a unique view on what happened on September 11, 2001, The Only Plane in the Sky. So these are just 6 of the books that we have here at the library that explore both in fiction and nonfiction about September 11th and what happened that day and what happened after. So I encourage you to come on down, especially if you want to learn more about this event. Check out one of these, or we can help you find some other books about the topic. I hope you tune back next week when we have a whole new teen book spotlight, and I hope you have a great week.